We're here at FedScoop's Zero Trust Summit with Jeff Mims, Chief Technologist at Leidos. Jeff, thank you so much for taking time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, as you know, the Office of Management and Budget in January outlined a number of strategic initiatives for federal agencies to adopt zero trust security standards. So thinking about some of those initiatives, I'd like to ask first, how would you describe how those requirements of zero trust have kind of impacted the identity and access management and multi-factor authentication programs that federal contractors are having to deal with?
Yeah, we've seen how effective MFA is, right? It's really one of the most impactful single measures that we have, especially for simple things like protecting against phishing attacks. So we're extremely supportive of comprehensive MFA requirements. In this case, OMB guidance builds on existing cybersecurity standards. So it shouldn't really be a surprise to any agency. It does reflect more of a zero trust architecture where access originates from an unprotected network, so not necessarily from a VPN. So we're helping a number of customers implement ICAM, the identity, credential, and access management capabilities, including MFA implementations and upgrades to PKI-enabled MFA. So the commercial world went to using cell phone apps and SMS to send one-time passwords. This reduces the cost, of sending and having to maintain hardware tokens, smart cards, things like that. Well, in defense, we still have to deal with hostile environments, right? There's no cell phones, biometrics are really hard to collect. And if you were to lose a CAT card or break a token, it could actually cost lives, right? These systems have to be accessible. So these are the kind of things that we have to work on, and why MFA is a lot harder when we talk about DoD versus just your average, banking app or something like that, where you can, from the comforts of our home, we can access it. So from a research perspective, we're taking these ICAM transitions and exploring how we can bring more user attributes in to enable this risk adaptive access control methodology. So we want to take modern identity systems. They're extremely rich in background data that can be used in risk calculations. So we're bringing this enhanced context from identity systems into use during continuous authentication, authorization for each resource request. So it's really important for the future of zero trust. And we're also working on transitions to support more cloud native identity providers. We see a lot of that, being able to implement single sign-on across multi-cloud providers in order to support today's current and also the future identity requirements like you're talking about.
Well, next, I'm curious, what challenges do you see government agencies still facing trying to maintain, for example, a complete inventory of authorized devices as spelled out in the requirements, and also ensure that endpoint detection and response, or EDR tools, are really properly deployed?
Yeah, now that's an interesting question. I've seen this requirement start to make its way into programs the last couple of years, especially with Comply to Connect initiatives. We need to detect 100% of endpoints on the network. That sounds simple, right? But we have to remember, we're talking about very large organizations with computers all over the world that have been acquired over more than a decade from a wide variety of sources. So fundamentally, the challenge to start with is, how do you know you've reached 100% when you don't know the total number of devices scattered all over the world, right? They could be in a warehouse at the bottom of a closet, who knows? And I'm talking about legitimate devices in this case. Like, think about a National Guard laptop. It pops on at a home station after being dormant for months in many cases. That's a legit device that we need to know about. So most organizations don't have confidence in their CMDB to claim that they can contain 100% of their assets. So they certainly don't have confidence that they have other more real-time data, like what's the physical location of the device. So to me, that CMDB aspect alone, it complicates so many other deployments, and it's really the first place that they need to focus. They need to get that thing accurate. So what we do is we load up workstations with agents, and we rely on those agents to have a heartbeat back and forth. But it's difficult to tell if an endpoint is just disconnected, turned off, or if the agent itself was compromised. So what we have to do for the future is focus on enhancing the context that we use in detection across products, across zero trust pillars, et cetera, right? We need to be focused on this integration challenge, because there's very little in the way of open standards today for interchanging this data. So that, to me, is the focus area for improving. And like I said, that and the CMDB to really get the assets understood, especially as we refresh them and things, make sure that they're accurately contained and described.
Well, and then shifting perspectives from the endpoint to cross-domain, how well equipped would you say federal agencies are today, let's say compared to a couple of years ago, to quickly identify and isolate segments of their IT environments that have been compromised?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I would say it depends, right? And it depends a bit what type of attack and the complexity of the compromise. So most network connections today, they're software defined, they're centrally managed. So it's much easier and faster to quarantine or drop a connection, right? So that response is simpler and more in the hands of a SOC analyst and so forth, right? We've gotten really good at filtering out scripted attacks like distributed denial of service and quickly patching known vulnerabilities. The thing to keep in mind, though, is attacker sophistication has gone through the roof. It's made it much harder to find the sharpest needle in the needle stack, right? So we're still talking about average detection times in the months for these more sophisticated things. And often a dramatic action follows discovery, right? Not a subtle isolation. This is a shut everything down, start digging, start getting into the forensic analysis because we know there's been a compromise, right? So from that perspective, we've got a long way to go. And I think we need to tackle zero trust effectively by embracing its mindset. I absolutely do not ever want to downplay the importance of preventative efforts. They're extremely important, like we talk about. They're critical. They're part of accreditation certification processes. But at the same time, we got to be prepared for real penetrations, and we need to test the processes, playbooks, and the automation tools like the SOAR tools, the RPA tools. We need to be able to test those to make sure that we can respond and that our data and system availability is protected without damaging user experience for the legit users, right? We got a long way to go there before we can fully trust human out of loop processes to remediate compromises, right? That reputation is really key. So we have to protect the mission, but we have to protect productivity too when we do this. So we want to be very careful where we leverage those things.
Absolutely. Well, lastly, looking ahead a bit, how are OMB zero trust policies altering the investment strategies of government contractors and system integrators like your organization?
Yeah, the last couple of years, this is an area that Leidos in particular has really pushed to get ahead on and stay out in front of guidance like the executive order and M2209, et cetera, right? So we've invested significant internal R&D dollars into zero trust and related cybersecurity technologies in order to shape the landscape and really be able to prepare our customers who have a lot of questions and concerns in this area, and they need the latest technologies, they need the latest integrations and so forth. So over the last year, we spent a lot of time working to incorporate guidance all across the industry. So OMB for sure, NIST, CISA, DoD, intelligence community, and a whole bunch of industry groups as well, in order to synthesize those policies, help prioritize milestones for our customers. The most common thing I hear is we've got a lot of new requirements and we've got no new funding. So from my perspective, we're so much stronger when we work together, right? And we've talked in the past about sharing threat intelligence. That's a great step forward, but we're also partnering across our customer populations to increase the intelligence of our cybersecurity systems. We want to be able to take real world data, build reinforcement learning and other AI ML analytics with that data. And to me, this is where the scale of a large system integrator can really create that immense value. It's not just our targeted investments, but it's bringing together the knowledge, data, and proven processes from across programs and customers and research efforts in order to bring that all into one place and really scale up.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff Mims, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us and share some of your insights here at our Zero Trust Summit conference.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.